Hey, good morning guys, I'm the Tech Prepper. Hope you're all doing well. We're going to continue our series on digital modes, and I have just come up on my 2-year anniversary of being on the air, and over that time I have acquired a lot of digital gear, and some of it has worked really well, others have worked okay, and some of the other ones I wish I hadn't really bought. So none of this is sponsored. I don't think any of this stuff was ever sent to me. So it's going to be completely open and honest. And the other thing to keep in mind is that my use case is likely very different than most hams. I started out the year by saying I wanted to focus on tools and not toys. And while all of the equipment I'm going to cover has worked for digital modes, some work better than others, I'm actually moving to the arena of I want the best gear to have the most reliability to support me when there's an emergency situation. So for MCOM, for public service events where I'm responsible for the safety of my team and other participants, and then also for SHTF. So we're going to start with the gear that I use every single day, and then we'll tail off by talking about some of the other gear that I've used and will be transitioning away from. So I'll put chapter markers for everything, so you can take a look at this as maybe drawing your own conclusions based on one device versus another. And again, it's not an apples to apples comparison because they're all very different and have very different capabilities. All right, let's get right to it. All right, so my number one absolute favorite piece of digital gear is the Mobilinkd TNC 2 and 3. I have both models, and I every day carry it in this little pouch. And the great thing about the Mobilinkd TNC is really its size. So really quite small. And there are a number of interface cables that work with most of my HTs and base stations. What's interesting about this one in relation to every other device we're going to talk about is that this is a Bluetooth device that pairs with your phone, computer, or tablet, but it is packet only. So you are limited to VHF, UHF, and really just packet mode operations. So that's APRS, WinLink packet, and connecting maybe to a bulletin board system. But in terms of emergency communications, the ability to send email, locate other stations, send text messages, this is really all I need, assuming that I have packet infrastructure in my area, which we do. So let's talk about the radios I've connected to it. This little kit actually has a couple of cables I everyday carry. The first is a small USB-C charger, actually not USB-C, USB micro charger. That is one con I would say, is that you have to make sure this device is charged up. So it could be a failure point, but I always carry a small 6-inch USB charging cable. I also carry two interface cables to connect to my HTs. The first is my everyday carry radio, and that is the Yaesu FT-60R. And this little cable works great. In fact, I can rubber band connect the Mobilinkd TNC to the back of this radio if I'm not running the belt clip. So I'll do that occasionally. So it's really quite nice to have some distance between your radio and the device. So the cables run about 10 bucks or so. So one cable for the FT-60. My second favorite radio that I pretty much use on the trail is the Yaesu VX6R, and it's because of its rugged construction. It has a slightly different cable. It uses the threaded tip ring sleeve connector, mostly because this is designed to be a water resistant radio. So I've got another 10 bucks here. So in general, that is how I like to have my setup. And this is the one piece of gear. Again, maybe to use a firearm analogy, it's not the firearm that is my favorite, but it's the one that I always have with me, so it's the most useful. So some things I actually do not care about in terms of the Mobilinkd TNC, both the 2 and 3, is that it is very easy to engage the power button and drain the battery. I can't tell you how many times I have done this. It is my biggest complaint. I really wish they would move to a mechanical slider switch. The TNC 3, the case is a little bit more rugged, but you could still, for example, press down, and as you can see there, I didn't press the button, but I just squeezed the case and it turned on. So what I've done over the years is I have a little piece of plastic covering this and then another piece of Velcro, but again, squeezing the case will still turn it on. So that's one of my complaints. The other cool thing about this rig here is that it works really well with the Baofeng radio, so I also have another $10 cable for the Baofeng. I really don't use this anymore. It's really what I started with a couple years ago, if you guys want to look back at those early videos. So it is supported, so they have a wide variety of integration with the HTs. And then I also like that they have the 6-pin mini DIN connector, so it works, for example, with all of my Yaesu radios that have a 6-pin mini DIN. It works great, so it's a beautiful choice for the FT-6000R, which is a dual band rig. It also works with my 857D and my Yaesu 817, 818. So for those reasons, the Mobilinkd TNC is absolutely my favorite go-to must-have item, even though you're limited just a packet. And I hear right now people crying. They get emails every single day saying it's not available to June, July. Put your order in, but I would absolutely recommend you get not one of these, but 2 of these and cables to interface with all of your radios. All right, let's move on. All right, so my number 2 pick is the DigiRig Mobile. I have been experimenting with this for a couple of months, and it works pretty much with all my radios, minus one small issue, but I've solved that problem. The cool thing about this is now we have transitioned to a sound card, a full-fledged sound card, so we have the ability to operate any digital mode on VHF, UHF, and HF. The Mobilinkd TNC can't do that, it's packet only. This also has the added benefit that it has a serial port, so it can engage your push-to-talk button. If your radio supports cat control, it can actually use cat to control your radio, and for some radios you can even use it for programming, like in the case of the Baofeng radio. The one issue I did have with this is with the USB-C cable. It had, for whatever reason, a lot of RFI, or I had a lot of RFI in one of my stations, the Yaesu FT-6000R, and it would lock up on transmit. So for me, that was enough to put that cable aside. I found a cable online, which is working pretty well for me, and put some ferrite beads, and that pretty much solved, actually completely solve the lockups on TX. So I'll put a link down below, and the FT-6000 now is working flawlessly with that. Just like the Mobilinkd TNC, you have a lot of options for your radios and cables, but that's also additional cost in addition to the hardware itself. The cables are a little bit more expensive than the Mobilinkd TNC cables, and I actually have purchased a few. So the first one I tested was with the Baofeng UV-5R. This is not my personal radio of choice, but I do like that they give you 2 cables. One is the programming cable, which I have not used. I'm not a believer in programming radios through software. I prefer to have muscle memory and know how to program things manually, but it's there. And then the interface cable for interfacing it to actually control the radio. So there's no cat control, but it will engage the push to talk, which is fantastic, and I've had really good success. So there was also, I think the first video we may have done the Baofeng integration and demo. I also recently have acquired the FT-60R cable, or the one for Yaesu HTs. Since this is my preferred EDC, I am absolutely pleased to have this. In fact, this edition was what put me over the top to personally start using the DigiRig. I don't know if I mentioned this, but I have 2 of these. I have a 3rd one coming today, and I will likely be buying 3 more so I can fully outfit all of my man packs and have this be the standard that I use moving forward, especially for MCOM tools. Now, there's another set of cables that I use pretty heavily, and this is called the Yaesu 8XX. They're designed to give you cat control and also get audio in and out of your Yaesu radios. I really haven't tested the cat control. That's something I really don't use. I just manually tune the radio. I'm not a contester, so I don't switch frequencies a whole bunch. But with this pair, I can interface this setup with my 857D, 817, 818. But primarily, I have been using just the 6-pin mini DIN connector to interface it with my man packs, and it works great with the FT-6000. I have a newer man pack build behind me, which is based on the Yaesu FT-8900, beautiful rig, and this works great. And just like the HTs, what's nice about it is that with the single cable on those mobile rigs, even if you don't have cat control, you can still engage the push to talk button. So for all of those reasons, DigiRig Mobile is my number 2 pick, and between that and my EDC, which is the Mobilinkd TNC, we're in business. All right, so my number 3 digital mode interface is the SignaLink USB. This is the first thing I started out with 2 years ago, and I absolutely love it. This is a classic, and my primary use case for this is only in the shack as a dedicated base station. This is actually what I use with my FT-2980R for all of the packet work I do on a regular basis. And the reason for it is it's a bit large compared to the other devices. It has delicate knobs on the front, but it has a lot of powerful features. So for the shack, for example, I do like having the individual controls on the front for controlling the TX volume, the receive volume, and the TX delay. So much higher quality kind of refinement of your audio levels, which I absolutely love. On the backside, there are a number of connectors that will connect to your rig and then to your computer. And the one port that I absolutely love is this 3.5 millimeter monitor jack. And I use this quite a bit at the beginning to plug in like my iPhone headphones so I can monitor basically the signals that I was sending out. At that time, I was using this on HF and didn't have a second HF rig so I could hear myself. So being able to monitor the audio with this port was really quite cool. So I will continue to use this. Again, it's just a base unit. One thing that's a little annoying, but I absolutely get it, is that depending on which radio you have, just like all the other ones, you do need custom cables for them. But they also have these little modules. So you open up the case, and depending on which radio, you can either use individual jumper wires, which I don't like because they may come loose, or you can go ahead and use these modules. So there's additional cost. So I actually have 3 of them. This kit in particular is for my FT-60, which is a little bit silly use case with this rig in the shack, but I wanted to experiment with it. And then this other one I believe was for the Yaesu 817 and 857D. Ran that for a while. And right now I permanently have this rig running my 2980R. So my personal recommendation, if you want a shack device, I think this one is it, just because it offers a lot in terms of troubleshooting and refinement. And again, having this size probably isn't an issue in the shack. All right, so now we're going to move into the equipment that I am no longer using and will likely sell or give away at some point, hopefully when we hit 10,000 subs. And number 4 is the DigiLink Nano. I have been using this now for about 5 months. And my only problem with this, it works, but I have had a few too many issues with it. But before we get into those, let's talk a little bit about what it is. So this is just a sound card interface. So you can do everything on VHF, UHF, and HF, but unlike the DigiRig, it does not support cat control. For me, that really isn't a big deal. I really don't mind tuning to the frequency and mode of operation because I don't use rig control. It's also the smallest device, which is what originally drew me to it, and I use this on the Man Pack. I have never had any RFI issues with this, no lockups, so pretty reliable there. I will say my biggest complaint is really on the 3.5 millimeter connector. I would notice that depending on how I turned it, sometimes it would actually break the connection, the mechanical connection. So I don't know if it's a bad cable, but I've had it happen on at least 2 of my 3 DigiLink Nanos. So for that reason, I actually tabled it. The other issue I had with the DigiLink Nano was on the FTM6000, which is my preferred Man Pack. I could not get the audio levels high enough for certain modes of operation. There are wonderful frequently asked questions on the DigiLink site that tell you how to resolve that problem, basically taking apart the case and then adding a little bit of solder on one of the jumper pins depending on where you're having audio issues. But for me, tools not toys philosophy. If I have to muck with something, I don't really want to trust it, but perfectly fine for the shack. Take it apart, adjust the audio levels one time for your radio and be done with it. Now, the one thing I really liked about the DigiLink Nano is the fact that it had a built-in Vox circuit like the SignaLink USB, which allowed me to connect this to my Android phone, and it worked really well. So there's a cable called an OTG, or on-the-go cable. And essentially what I would do is take the USB cable, and I would plug this into my on-the-go adapter and stick this into my Android device. And I believe the on-the-go, or the ability to connect like a sound card, only works on Android. It doesn't work on the iPhone, but it basically presents a sound card interface that Android can use on the newer versions of Android. And I was able to use the FL Digi application and FL Message, I believe it's called. I was able to use APRS Droid, and it worked really well. And the cool thing about the Vox circuit being in this unit versus using the radio is that it doesn't suffer from the delays to terminate the signal. So really cool stuff. So I may keep one of these and sell two of them, because I may use this as my interface to my Android phone, so that I have that ability. Because like I said in the previous section, I don't believe there is a built-in Vox circuit into the DigiRig. So that's really all I wanted to say about the DigiLink Nano. If you guys were an early adopter when I started posting these pictures on Instagram and Twitter, I apologize, but this is my process. I like to test things, and if they have some percentage of failure, that's not going to be in line with my personal use case of having these be bulletproof tools. All right, let's move on. All right, number 5, we're going to look at the APRS-K1 cable for the Baofeng UV-5R. I bought this because I love the simplicity of this setup, basically having just your radio and a single cable. That's what drew me to it. The big problem I have with the APRS-K1 cable is that it basically just passes audio in and out of your radio. So you have to rely on the Vox circuit built into your radio. And in the case of the Baofeng UV-5R, the TX tail, the time it takes for the transmission to drop off after the audio is done, is too long. I believe it might be 2 seconds, which for things like APRS is just a non-starter. I do know that people are having good luck, for example, using this still with APRS Droid, like they're able to transmit, but again, if they're getting things like acknowledgements back, they may miss those. But the other use case for this one, apparently these are very popular with the ATAC community. And ATAC is something I'm going to explore a bit later, and I would imagine you're still limited to the same issues of either the transmission delay and the time to kill the transmission tail. But I want to mention to you guys, I did buy one. I'll probably keep this around for some future experiments, especially when I get into ATAC. But for me, not really going to be using this setup. All right, so we have enough battery to do a number 6, and this is an honorable mention. This is the Sabrent USB. All it is a simple sound card dongle, and I have used it with my Yaesu 818ND and my Yaesu FT-857D. In fact, this is the longest bit of running gear I have for digital, and it has worked remarkably well for me in the backcountry. But I will be replacing this in favor of the DigiRig, because I love standards. So the one issue I have with this one is that it's sound card only, and the enclosure is a weird dimension. So depending on other USB connectors you may have, it may be a tight fit or not fit at all. So a lot of YouTubers are actually removing the enclosure and just wrapping up the PCB with electrical tape. And I have done that for a couple of my units on the Raspberry Pi. Now you do need a special cable. So in the case of the 857, 817, 818, there is a 6-pin mini DIN that I bought, or mini DIN connector I bought on, I believe it was eBay, and it allows you to get audio in and out. The only challenge is you need to be able to initiate the push to talk, and since this only does audio in and out, you do need to have a cat control cable, which is additional cost. I don't have it with me. It's still all cinched up on the man packs in the safe, but suffice to say that you need 2 cables to be able to basically have all of this work for those radios. So I wanted to mention it because it hasn't failed me. It's worked incredibly reliably for me in the past, and you know, I don't know if I'm going to sell these because, like I said, this has a soft spot in my heart because it's always worked and it would continue to work. So maybe it's a good backup. So with that said, guys, I hope you enjoyed this little tour and series on digital modes. We're not quite done yet. I don't know if I'm going to do another one right after this, but there is a video that I'm working on for all of you preppers out there. So all of the ham radios, la 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 la, or ham radio guys, put your hands over your ears. We're going to talk about encryption. We're going to talk about SHTF. We're going to talk about MERS, and I'm going to show you how to do encrypted digital communication over RF. So stick around for that one. I still need to poke around on the FCC legalese because it's a little bit unclear. But with that said, guys, I hope you enjoyed this very long video. I'm the Tech Prepper. Be strong, be safe, and be prepared. Oh, time for work.